Now here we are quickly going to see some of the errors and exceptions in DynamoDB. So there are two types of errors: server-side errors and client-side errors. Now you might already know about this. Server-side errors are categorized with HTTP 500 codes, so 5xx, for example, service not available, internal server error, and things like that. And client-side errors are 400 errors like authentication failure or missing required parameters or forbidden 403 forbidden error. That kind of errors are client-side errors, and both of these are the ways how DynamoDB returns errors. And DynamoDB also returns some exceptions. For example, here are some common exceptions. So I'm not really going to go into this. You just have to know that these are some of the exceptions, and you can make out from name of the exception what they really mean. So access denied exception means you have some client-side error that your application doesn't have the right permissions to access the DynamoDB tables. And these are some of the exceptions. And then at the end, you see provision throughput exceeded exception. So this occurs when you consume more than what you have provisioned. And if you're using the AWS SDKs to communicate with DynamoDB from your application, then these SDKs are designed to automatically retry whenever it sees the provision throughput exceeded exception. Or if you're not using the AWS SDK, you can still code your application to retry on such exceptions. And more often than not, when you retry, you might not run into that exception again. So this is one way to resolve the provision throughput exception. Another option is to use exponential backoff. Now, both of these options, error retries and exponential backoff, are built into AWS SDKs. What exponential backoff does is, for example, you make a request and you get a provision throughput exceeded exception. Then exponential backoff is going to wait for, let's say, 100 milliseconds or so before it retries. And on the retry, if it still gets the same exception, then this time it is going to wait a little longer. So it might wait about 200 milliseconds before retrying. And then again, if it gets the same exception, it's going to wait even longer. So it might wait, for example, 400 milliseconds before retrying. And if you continue to get the provisioned throughput exception, then that's when it will stop retrying and back off. So this is how exponential backoff works. And this is built into AWS SDKs. If you're not using these SDKs, then you can code your applications in the similar fashion.